Hey guys, welcome back to Dream Analytica. This is going to be part 2 on more on the Animus. And the reason I want to make a part 2 is because I want to cover anything that I might have missed. I don't really script these videos, so just to show you that all of this information comes from experience and not memory. And I think that's important for me to establish because a lot of the literature on the Animus can be quite theoretical, and without proper experience, you won't really know what that theory looks like in practice or in experience. A lot of this information comes from experience. So to summarize what we talked about last time, we sort of covered how the Animus was or in its negative aspect, the inner devil of the woman's psychology. So we're going to sort of bleed in today into the positive aspects of the Animus and what he looks like and how he behaves and what his internal dynamic with the woman is in her psychology. And we'll dive into some dream examples and see what is going on there. Again, to recap, if this is your first time watching, I do highly recommend watching the first video of this series in order to understand where we're coming from. I want to mention that the fastest way, the best way for you to see your Animus as a woman, the best way for you to understand what your Animus looks like, what your Animus is doing. Remember, the Animus is the inner masculine aspect within a woman's psychology. So he quite literally appears as a man in dreams. So the best way to understand what he looks like is to see what you dream about. See if you have a dream about a masculine figure, see what the dynamic is like, see what your relationship is like in the dream. This topic is so vast, it's so big, and it's quite difficult to come across any literature regarding the Animus because, as I mentioned in the first video, not many people have written about him. The first reason is because most of the writing actually has come from men, ironically, and I don't know if that's right or wrong. It's not for me to say. It just is that way. That's a fact, that more men have written about the Animus than women, particularly Carl Jung. The reason why few women have written about him, as I mentioned in the previous video, is because he is very difficult to find within her own psychology. It's very difficult for a woman to see into her own psychology with the logos principle or the rational aspect, because he is the logos. The Animus is the logos principle. What does that mean? It means that this is not for every woman, obviously, but for the general population. You could say that the rational aspect, because a woman is more in tune with her feelings, eros, love, that her rational aspect, or the logos principle, is in the unconscious. That aspect is particularly what is required to dissect, right? So if your logos, you need your logos to dissect information, to separate things, to distinguish. If that's in your unconscious, what tool are you going to use to dissect your own psychology? Now, men's unconscious is eros, is the feminine principle. So men can dissect their own feminine principle because they are, for the most part, logos up front, consciously. So men normally like to rationalize things, like to make things framed in a logical framework. So we can dissect our own psychology and we can assist the woman in doing so too. But if a woman is going to write about her experiences with her own unconscious logos principle, how would you do that without, the rational aspect? That's not to say that there are some women who have developed a very strong logos up front, and they usually turn out to be really great scientists, really great researchers in their field. But that's the thing, that could be another problem, is because if they have developed such a high level of logic, of rational function, they probably won't lean into psychology as much. It's debatable. Again, I've had experience dealing with certain women of very capable intelligence, very high intelligence in terms of logos. And there's one other thing too. The Animus, your inner man, he can develop a very high intellect too. So it's sort of tricky to see when the intellect belongs to the woman, the feminine, or if it belongs to her Animus, and the Animus is just parroting for her, speaking for her. Because what the Animus does is it loves to collect words and information. And one of the stages of development for the Animus in women, there are four, just like in men with the Anima, there are four stages. One of the stages is the word, or the priest, meaning that in terms of evolution, like you could say the first stage is like Tarzan, like a brute, like a very primitive male figure. And then the third stage would be the priest, the word. So the Animus loves to take words that, again, I mentioned this in the previous video, that sound true in the general sense, and it may be true in the general sense, in the spirit of the population, it may be true. But again, this Animus is of intellect, so it neglects the personal, individual feelings of whoever you're dealing with at the time. And this is particularly true if you're in a marital relationship with your husband. And you can see that you may collect these ideas, these general notions that conflict with the personal feelings of your husband. And then you could say that, where's the woman in that regard? Where is the feminine relatedness, the warmth in the relationship when the woman is being possessed by her Animus? But again, it's very difficult to discern. If you don't have an understanding of this stuff, it is difficult to discern when the woman's intellect belongs to her or if it belongs to the Animus. So I have seen a lot of women that have developed a very high level of intellect that have maintained their femininity. And that shows you the power of their feminine nature. Now you combine it with a healthy logos principle instead of a negative one, which is the devil, then you have such a powerful human being, because like she could be, just think of the possibilities. I mean, it's immense. If a woman has the capability to build very deep, meaningful connections with people, but at the same time have a very strong logos, intellect, a rationality. So you again, we're gonna go back and forth, but it all connects anyways. But this video is more on the positive aspects of the Animus. What does he look like in the positive aspect? So we went over a few of the stages of the Animus, and we said that you could take certain fairy tales of different stages of what the Animus looks like. So the first one was like a brute, like the Beast in Beauty and the Beast. Tarzan, he could be the first stage. The second stage I usually equate to like a knight in shining armor. He's pretty stoic. He's there to support the woman. The next stage is like a priest. He's the word. And then the fourth stage is like Jesus or Buddha, like the enlightened stage, the highest stage of the Animus development. And men have their Anima development too, with Sophia being the highest stage of wisdom. So Buddha or Jesus represents wisdom, the highest attainment that you can get in psychological development for your Animus. And it's amazing, because once you attain that level of insight about the world, about your logos principle, if you can tie it with wisdom and make wise decisions, you become extremely powerful. Internally, you become secure because you have a way of understanding how to live properly now. You have a guiding factor, which is your Animus. He is a guiding force within you that supports you and directs you in life when things get rough. Instead of taking over when life gets tough, he lifts you up, he carries you, he pulls you up from the depths of despair with wisdom, with God's enlightenment, with the highest. That's what a lot of women are actually seeking, although they're projecting it outward. A lot of these religious women are actually seeking that internal guidance. And I saw this Instagram video. I don't have it. I don't think I can find it, but I would love, if I had it, I would show you. But there's this mother, this old mother in America. She's sitting on the couch, and I think her daughter mentioned something about Jesus, like seeing Jesus, that he has finally come. She started like freaking out, like, God, please show me, show me. She started crying, like so desperately. And that told me something as a psychologist, that you see, it's not out there, it's in here. Your inner God is in here, yourself. It's the center of your psyche. And what the problem is with religion is that they have projected that self outside of themselves. And whenever you project something, you throw it out of yourself. And so it's missing within you. So projection is a really bad thing, although quite possibly inevitable thing in psychology. It's something that we try to reduce, to minimize, to mitigate in psychology, especially in Jungian therapy or analytical psychology. We're trying to take back our projections, especially our shadow, in order to become whole. You can't become whole if you're throwing stuff out there. That doesn't make any sense. If you want to become whole, you have to recognize these things in yourself, both the light and the shadow. So if there are things that trigger you about some of this animus talk that may sting a little, that may be offensive, that's a good thing, because what it tells you is that whether positive or negative, if you have a strong feeling about this thing, it means something is being triggered. It means something resonates, although in a negative sense. But that means something is affecting you about these words, which means you have to recognize, why is it triggering you? Now, if all this information is nonsense, then you would just be indifferent about it. If it had no resonance with you, you would be indifferent, and therefore you would just ignore it and move along. But if you are triggered by it, that's a good thing. It means that something is hitting your unconscious, and your unconscious is reacting to it. You don't know what it is yet, but if you analyze yourself and you ask yourself, wait, why is this actually triggering to me? Is it possible that I may be projecting it? And then once you take back your projection, you become more whole. And the closer you get to the highest state of psychological development, which is enlightenment, wholeness. And your animus, by the way, is the mediator. He guides you towards the self. He guides you towards the inner God. He is the partner that you need to establish that state of completeness. Without him, if you don't recognize him, without him, you won't be able to achieve that. Like wholeness as a metaphor, if you look at dreams, wholeness is usually a whole of something. So a man and a woman, or it could be one individual that is both male and female. It can also represent a mandala. In Buddhist traditions, the reason why they're drawing these mandalas is because that's the image of the self. That's the image of God, of totality. We just have different words for it. God, totality, the universe, that wholeness. We say universe because it's all-encompassing. And that is exactly what is at the center of our psyche. And you can attain that level, you can attain that journey through the individuation process, through integrating your shadow, and then integrating your animus, your masculine side. And that's why it's so important for you to understand the negative aspect of the animus, because that's usually the first stage of integration. It's not going to be all like rainbows and sunshine. It's painful. It's a painful process to do any of this. And if one thing women understand is suffering, we all know with a bit of wisdom that we cannot escape suffering. We have to endure it. Life is not about being happy, it is about suffering, unfortunately. That's what Buddha teaches, that's what Jesus teaches, it's suffering. So you need to recognize that, and recognize that suffering is inevitable, and to attain that level of enlightenment, you need to understand that fact of life. So what we're trying to do is to first unearth this animus guy, because what we have generally assumed is that he's unconscious. For the most part, for most women, he's unconscious. Therefore, he's in his evil aspect. Whatever is unconscious is projected. So, and projection is an evil thing because it's unconscious. The unconscious is not evil in the sense of morality. It's just evil in the sense that it's not human. It has not been morally filtered. There's no ethics there in the unconscious. We do a lot of crazy things in the unconscious. So the reason why we're shedding light on his negative form is because he's been unconscious for so long, and now he's being unearthed. And what we want to do is understand what his negative qualities are first, his shadow, in order to understand what his light looks like, because that's the hardest part. You don't want to look at his light side and then deal with his shadow aspect. It's going to be more painful that way. We want to do the hard part first and then get to the easy part. So that's what the first video was about, shedding light on his negative aspect and how he manifests, how he appears in the woman. And we're doing it very painfully and very slowly, because this information is not common knowledge. This information has been buried for a long time, ever since Carl Jung passed away. He was seemingly buried under the noise of all this modern clinical psychology, But what I've come to understand out of, all these psychologists that I've read upon, Jung had the answer, in my opinion. It might not be the answer for everyone, but in my opinion, I'm pretty sure he had it. He had the answer, and that's why I'm using Jungian psychology. It saved my life, and it's amazing the results that have occurred when working with people that I love, like people that I work with, clients. It's absolutely amazing. And I also have a niece. She's only 4 years old. It's just incredible because you understand, once you understand Jungian psychology, and particularly the Animus, if I have a niece that's 4 years old, and by the way, they made me her godfather, which is, I can tell you a little bit about that in regards to Jungian psychology. Once you understand Jungian psychology as a man, and you have a little girl, like a niece, you understand just how important it is for the father to understand his own psychology, because that's the psychology that's going to be imparted to the daughter. And if you want the daughter to have a healthy masculine image of a man, then the father must be healthy. Equally, if the father is in a bad state, which I'm not going to badmouth the current situation, but he does work in finance, so that should give you some indication of what's going on in his psychology. It's going to be imparted to the child. And many people don't know this because, again, this information has been buried for so long, but the role of the godfather, other than, the practical means of, if anything happens to the parents, the psychological reason for the godfather is to compensate where the father lacks. So if the father is over analytical, the unlived life of the parents is the most tragic thing for the child. Meaning, if the father is over analytical, that's going to create a significant imbalance in the daughter or even the son, meaning that the image left upon him will be one to compensate where the father lacked. So, and I've analyzed his psychology too. Because he's over analytical working in finance, he's given up that other side, the creative side, the unlived life, the other half of life that he did not live. And that gets passed on to the daughter and the son. So the role of the godfather is to compensate for that. And can you imagine the tragedy if I did not know about this psychological, circumstance? It would be crazy, because the role of the godfather is to compensate for that. So where the father lacks, I lift. So she has a whole healthy image, not just the light, but also the shadow. And the shadow is not bad. The shadow is not all bad. The shadow can be primitive, like a brute, but altogether it's not bad or good. It's just, it just is. So the role of the godfather is to ensure, in the psychological framework, is to ensure the image is properly transferred from father to daughter, like to compensate for what the father lacks. So I can be analytical, but I'm also very artistic and creative. I practice a lot of art during my spare time, just for myself. And I did go to design school, so I'm familiar with the technical aspects of art as well as the unconscious aspect, the creative processes. And I also play several instruments during my free time. So I balance out his unlived life for the father. Equally, that's what the godmother is there to do as well. They don't have a godmother at the moment. Yeah, but that's not the Animus we're talking about. This is why it's so important for you as a woman to recognize what a good image of a man looks like within yourself, because then you're going to be able to understand what it looks like outside. And by recognizing what your inner man looks like, you're going to stop projecting it outward, take it back, become more whole, and then the image of your inner man transforms into something healthier, something powerful, something supportive, like a knight in shining armor, Buddha, Jesus. Yeah, it's just like the image of Buddha. You want him to be guiding you, not to be forcing anything upon you, not to be using the woman, the inner child, the woman in any sense. You want him to be a figure of guidance, a figure of support, a holy figure. Buddha has been my choice, and mainly is the image that I'm trying to impart to my family, to my sister, to my niece, to my mother. My mother is Buddhist. My sister is actually Christian, and my my 4-year-old niece is atheist, I think. Uh, which is funny because the nephew believes in God, but when I asked her if she believes in God, she's just like, no. Anyways, but yes, these gives you an idea of just what I'm gonna get into in maybe another video is you're starting to see the connections that psychology connects everything. So understanding your psychology is actually connecting you to the spiritual realm. Just by understanding psychology, you don't need to take, you know, ayahuasca or go to church to do these things. As a matter of fact, I'm not going to say that, but you don't need to do those things because it is within you already. You just need to stop projecting it outward in order for him to become fully developed. You need to shine a light on him first by dealing with the negative aspects. And once you just do that, once you just reveal him to yourself, once you just acknowledge his existence, he starts to transform into something better, into something that will bring you more peace. And that's the goal here. And that's what I'm trying to help you do. By giving you all of this, it's seemingly random insights, this mess of information, what your mind is going to do, your unconscious, your animus is listening to me right now. He loves words, remember? I said that in the beginning. So he's taking all of this in, and he's taking it and he's putting it together for you, even if you don't understand it, your unconscious does. And he actually loves it. He just doesn't want to be revealed, but he loves this thing because it's like, so someone finally sees me. It's like that. This is gonna sound a bit bad, but it's like that, you know, those serial killers, where they want to be known. They need the attention. They don't want to be, you know, caught, but they want to be known. They want people to know. They want fame, you know, they want that recognition. It's the Animus is sort of like that. It like doesn't want to be caught, and he doesn't want to be revealed, but he's sort of like, he wants to be, you know, seen. It's a paradox, but the psychology is a paradox. And women are really good at dealing with paradox, by the way. And there's a lot of paradox that goes on in psychology, which explains a lot of women behavior, by the way. It's because women deal with paradox all the time, and it's very difficult. But because this is what makes Jungian psychology so appealing to women, is because in Jungian psychology we accept paradox as a matter of fact. It just is the case. And so we don't, in Jungian psychology, we understand women behavior because women deal with paradox. Women deal with these very conflicting things that are going on inside that you know, that men brush off as crazy. But in Jungian psychology, there's an acceptance that we understand. No, it's not crazy, it's paradox. Men can't handle it. You need rationalization. You could never handle the paradox that women handle. So we understand in Jungian psychology, and one of the things Jung said, I'm paraphrasing here, was that women are far more open to this than men are. Primarily because in Jungian psychology, what Carl Jung understood, he didn't like the term Jungian psychology, by the way. He didn't like Jungian analysts either. He preferred everyone to be an individual and not take an ideology and a practice, which is why there's no theory, there's no practice in his. But he said women were more open to this because in Jungian psychology, we understand that paradox exists, and the mind of the woman, because it's so interconnected with the collective unconscious, is full of paradox, including intuition, including feeling, the animus, you know, all of this stuff creates a whole bunch of paradoxical chaos in the woman. So I know I'm digressing here, but again, it's all, your unconscious is going to absorb all of this, your animus is going to take all of this, and either he's going to hate it or he's going to love it. What you can do is try to understand this information, understand that revealing him is uncomfortable. It's going to be uncomfortable for you. It's like taking this black thing out, you know, finally. But it also feels good because it seems like finally somebody understands. And as a matter of fact, Jungian psychologists understood a long time ago, but this information has been buried for so long. So finally, somebody understands what is going on inside the psychology of women. Someone understands the evil that is produced that is not necessarily the individual woman herself, but the unconscious aspect within a woman's psychology. Again, this does explain the accountability issue, why it's a bit more difficult for women to take accountability. It is quite practically because a lot of these unconscious forces do take over. So the woman sort of feels like she was quite literally outside of her body at the time, like something else took over. Again, be careful with that because it is you, and what psychology aims to do is to take responsibility back and to make sure that these processes don't overwhelm us and don't take over our bodies and manipulate us and make us do things. But there is now an understanding that it's not entirely your fault. You know, it may not have been your fault at all. It's just we didn't have enough information, but now we do. And quite frankly, we've had this information for a while, which is why it's so disappointing that it's not more common it's not common knowledge. There's very few people who understand the animus to this degree. So again, it might not be your fault. Some of the things that you do, some of the actions that you take in the long term, again, this is very powerful information, but a lot of the actions that you do in the moment, like let's say it's attributed to a lack of logos, a lack of future foresight, can be attributed to this problem. And then the woman, you know, regrets the decisions she made, you know, 20 years ago. And we want to reduce that because it's very painful to be in such a situation. And it was, you know, you could say that maybe it wasn't you who was making those decisions in the past, that it was this unconscious entity that took over. Again, that's not to shirk you of responsibility. It's to make sure that you're aware that these things can happen. It's not to remove responsibility. You did make those decisions, but it was just that these unconscious things can take over. Equally for men, when we have these outbursts, when we do or say things that we didn't mean to, when we cannot control our emotions and we become hysterical, like our anima woman behaves in a hysterical manner, crazy. It was not under the man's control. It's his anima. He couldn't control it, you know. Equally, when the man falls in love, it might not even be in his control. But all of this information is very powerful stuff, and I'm delivering it to you like in spoonful because it's a lot of information. So that's part 2 of elucidating the animus, or more on the animus. And I'm just going to keep talking about the animus whenever I come across new information, whenever I have new ideas about it. So again, just to recap, that this video, if it's a TLDR, this video is about some of the positive aspects of the animus and what he may look like in dreams. Remember, the reason I have not focused too much on the dreams is because the dreams are so individualistic. But I can tell you that you will be able to get a good picture of what he may look like in your dreams, what stage of development he may be in your dreams. There's also something I didn't cover, which I could probably cover in the next video, but I'll touch up on it here, is the incubus and the succubus, which is the sex demons that we have, that we dream about. And usually it's, for men, it's the woman, I think she's the succubus. And then for the woman, it's the incubus. So these are sexual demons. What stage of development the animus would be at that form? It's probably the primitive one, that the sexual problem has not been resolved yet. So usually in psychology, the lowest form of development is usually animalistic, which is the sexual or the instinctual drives, usually represented by some animal, like a pig, or like for men, it's a bear, but usually an animal. And then as you develop your psychology, you, again, like we said before, Tarzan, the knight, the priest, and then the Holy Spirit or God or Buddha or something like that. So I hope you found this insightful. Leave a comment below. I got this really beautiful comment from, I think I'll share it with you here, from her, and it really, you know, encouraged me to keep going, because sometimes it can be a lot sharing this information when, you know, there's quite a lot of discouragement out there. even though you're just trying to, you know, help, because this is something I enjoy doing. I love looking at dreams, and I love psychology, and I think Jungian psychology saved my life, and I think it could save other people's lives in a metaphorical or even literal sense, save your life. So yeah, don't be afraid to leave a comment if you have questions. We're not here to judge. We're really not here to judge or berate, or, you know, we're not trying to degrade anybody here, or be sexist, or whatever ism there is. We're just trying to be psychologists. We're trying to analyze things as they are. We're trying to understand things as they are, how the dreamer, you know, is affected by their dreams. It's not up to the therapist to interpret the dreams. It's actually up to the dreamer. The therapist or the analyst is just there as a translator or a guide to help the dreamer, to point the dreamer in the right direction if they go too far left or too far right. We're just here to help, you know, balance, which leads me to the other point. If you want to reach out to me directly without, you know, public display, you could follow the link in the description to my website, and you can contact me directly. You could leave a dream there anonymously, or yeah, just leave a comment. You can download the app for more information on the Animus, very detailed information on the Animus, which, in response to maybe some comments that I received on my Animus video, if you have watched that, the triggering aspect, again, most of that information was not mine, though that information came from women, Emma Young, Toni Wolff, and Marie-Louise von Franz. There is the objective description written by Carl Jung, but the personal descriptions about the Animus and how he behaves, and what he's doing in terms of like energy conservation and the biological role of women, those are from women, not me, not a man. So it's, I don't, you know, I'm just trying to condense that information and share it. So yeah, please don't take offense to any of it. Just try to see it from an objective standpoint. And if it doesn't resonate with you, just, you know, it doesn't resonate. It's fine. It's just there to illustrate what the potential things that are going on. Because it is true, technology, one thing I remember is in the comment and my video is that one thing that is true is that technology has taken away a lot of the work or the rituals that we used to do when we were more primitive, you know? Like something as simple as lighting a match to light the stove for baking, you know, something as simple as that. Cooking, you know, we replaced with delivery services now. These rituals leave a giant store of energy. The energy from the unconscious cannot be expressed. That's a huge problem for psychology, not just for women, but for men too. What happens when the rituals are gone? The unconscious will revolt. And that's precisely what they're trying to say, what Emma Young was trying to say. And by the way, Emma Young is Carl Jung's wife. So, I mean, that tells you everything you need to know, that it's, you know, this isn't sexist stuff. This is just, she's just trying to mention what is happening in her time. And we can apply it to our time now because technology has gotten even better than it was back then. So what it's saying is, what do we do with all of this energy? And then it's true, there is we have a biological role as well. As men and women, we have biological roles. And we get to choose, obviously, what we want to do with those roles. And she's just mentioning, what do we do with that energy? So if the woman decides she doesn't want to have a baby, then she's going to take this maybe career path. That's not good or bad, it's just what she was mentioning, like, okay, that's her freedom to choose, and she has every right to choose that, and maybe that's her role in the grand scheme of things. That is her destiny. It's neither, we're just trying to see it in an objective sense. That's all. And once we are aware of these dynamics, aware that what happens as a consequence of this, like, let's say she did, you know, have a baby, what are the consequences of that? We're not looking at it as good or bad, it's just these are the consequences, because it is true, the birth rates across the developed world are declining. Fewer and fewer women are deciding to have children. That is not an opinion, it's a fact. It is part of the statistics now. We see it, women have the ability to choose what they do with their bodies, and that's completely up to them. We're just seeing it as analysts to see, okay, what happens then as a consequence of that energy that is not used for the biological role and instead used for a career, or possibly not even a career, or just wanting to be single. Equally for the men, what happens when the man is no longer the breadwinner? What happens to that energy? He becomes more feminine. These are just consequences of those things that we just have to see from an objective standpoint. All right, I'm kind of droning on here, but thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you at the next one.